Imagine a world silenced. Picture empty villages, overgrown with weeds, where homes stand as hollow monuments to the families that once lived within. See the chilling sight of mass graves, hastily dug pits overflowing with the dead. This isn't a scene from a movie. This was the grim reality of the 14th century, when a spectre of death known as the Black Death swept across Europe, wiping out as much as half of its population. It was a catastrophe of unimaginable scale, a plague that would not only kill millions but also forever alter the course of human history. How did this happen? What was this terrifying disease? And how did humanity survive an apocalypse? Our story begins not in Europe, but far to the east, in the vast steppes of Central Asia, around the 1330s. Here, in the arid grasslands, a bacterium called Yersinia pestis lived quietly among populations of rodents, like marmots. For centuries, it remained a localized threat. But the world was changing. The Mongol Empire had created a vast, interconnected network of trade routes, the legendary Silk Road. Caravans laden with silks, spices, and other precious goods moved constantly between east and west. And hidden within these caravans, aboard their ships, and in their cargo were stowaways, black rats. And on these rats were even smaller stowaways, fleas carrying a deadly passenger. The journey of the plague was relentless. Following the trade routes, it moved like an invisible army. We can trace its path on a map. From Central Asia, it struck China, where it caused immense devastation. By 1346, it had reached the Black Sea port of Kaffa, a bustling trading hub controlled by Genos merchants. During a siege of the city, the Mongol army, afflicted by the plague, reportedly catapulted infected corpses over the city walls, one of the earliest and most horrifying examples of biological warfare. Fleeing merchants unknowingly carried the disease back with them. From Kaffa, Genos galleys spread the plague to Constantinople, the heart of the Byzantine Empire. By October 1347, 12 of these ships arrived at the Sicilian port of Messina. The people of Messina were horrified to find most of the sailors aboard were already dead or gravely ill, covered in black boils. They hastily expelled the death ships, but it was too late. The rats had already scurried ashore. The Black Death had arrived in Europe. From Sicily, the plague exploded across the continent with terrifying speed. It moved up the Italian peninsula, striking hubs like Genoa, Venice, and Florence. It spread into France, Spain, and then across the Channel to England in 1348. It reached Germany, Scandinavia, and by 1351, even remote Russia. No corner of the continent was safe. The ports, the lifeblood of medieval commerce, became the primary entry points for death. Bustling harbours that once teemed with life and trade transformed overnight into silent quays, their ships rotting at anchor, their crews either dead or having fled in terror. The very interconnectedness that had brought Europe prosperity now facilitated its near destruction. So, what was it like to face this disease? For the people of the 14th century, who had no concept of germ theory, it was a divine punishment, a work of witchcraft, or a poison in the air. The reality was a medical nightmare. The most common form was the bubonic plague. After being bitten by an infected flea, a person would seem fine for a few days. Then, the symptoms would hit: a high fever, chills, vomiting, and excruciating pain. The telltale sign appeared within a day or two: the buboes. These were grotesquely swollen lymph nodes, typically in the groin, armpits, or neck, that could grow to the size of an apple. They would turn black as the tissue died, which is how the Black Death got its name. For most, death was the certain outcome, usually within a week. But there were other, even more terrifying forms. The pneumonic plague attacked the lungs. It was spread not by fleas, but directly from person to person through coughing. It was almost 100% fatal, with death often coming in just 1 or 2 days. Then there was the septicemic plague, where the bacteria entered the bloodstream directly. It caused high fevers and purple or black skin patches as the blood failed to clot. It was so swift that victims could literally go to bed healthy and be dead by morning. Imagine the sheer terror. Your neighbor, your friend, your child could be healthy one moment and dead the next. The air itself seemed to carry death, and no one understood why or how to stop it. Doctors, with their primitive knowledge, were powerless. Their treatments, like bloodletting or lancing the buboes, often did more harm than good. They wore bizarre, bird-like masks with long beaks stuffed with herbs, hoping to filter out the bad air, a haunting image that has become synonymous with the plague. As the death toll mounted, the very fabric of society began to unravel. Fear shattered the most fundamental human bonds. People did the unthinkable. Parents abandoned their sick children. Husbands left their wives. The healthy fled the cities, leaving the sick and dying to fend for themselves. Homes were walled up with entire families inside, the healthy trapped with the infected. The streets were littered with the dead, as there was no one left to bury them. The normal rites of passage were abandoned. Priests, terrified of catching the disease, refused to administer last rites. The sound of church bells, which once told for individual deaths, either rang constantly or fell silent altogether. In this atmosphere of chaos and despair, extremism flourished. Some turned to hedonism, believing the end of the world was nigh. They drank, feasted, and lived for the moment. Others turned to extreme piety. Groups of flagellants emerged, wandering from town to town, whipping themselves in public displays of penance, believing that by punishing themselves, they could appease God's wrath and end the plague. Their processions, however, often did more to spread the disease than to stop it. The world seemed to be descending into madness, a complete societal collapse where law, order, and compassion had evaporated in the face of overwhelming fear. But humanity endured. By the early 1350s, the first and most devastating wave of the Black Death began to recede, leaving a changed world in its wake. The immediate aftermath was one of silence and emptiness. Entire villages had been wiped off the map. Fields lay fallow. But this immense tragedy had unforeseen and revolutionary consequences. The death of so many people created a massive labor shortage. Suddenly, the surviving peasants and labourists found themselves in a position of power they had never known. For centuries, the feudal system had tied serfs to the land, working for a lord in exchange for protection. Now, with workers so scarce, lords had to compete for them. They were forced to offer wages, better conditions, and even freedom. This shift in power dynamics dealt a fatal blow to the old feudal order. Serfdom began to collapse, and a new, more modern wage-based economy started to emerge. The psychological impact was also profound. The church's inability to stop the plague or even explain it shook people's faith. They began to question authority and tradition in a way they never had before. This newfound skepticism, this focus on human experience and a more secular worldview, planted the seeds for the Renaissance. With labour being more valuable, there was a greater incentive to invent labour-saving devices, spurring innovation. The immense loss of life, as horrific as it was, acted as a catalyst. It cleared away the rigid, old structures of the medieval world and created the space for something new to grow. The art, the science, the philosophy of the Renaissance rose from the ashes of the Black Death. The world was reshaped, not just by the millions who died, but by the ways in which the survivors chose to rebuild. The Black Death stands as a somber reminder of our vulnerability, but also as a powerful testament to human resilience and our capacity to find a new beginning even after the darkest of times. Thank you for watching. If you found this journey into the past insightful, please hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most pivotal moments. Let us know in the comments what historical event you'd like us to cover next. Until then, stay curious.